Hi there. Welcome to the first Global Reiki webinar of 2016. I'm Rachel Goldberg, and I'm here with Phyllis Furumoto, the lineage bearer of Usui Shiki Ryoho, who many of you know and have learned from or have learned from her in these public broadcasts that we do every 6 to 8 weeks, completely free for the Global Reiki community. So just looking into the chat, this is so great. I'm seeing hello from Belgium, Bucharest, Colombia, Netherlands, London, lots of people in the UK and US. I think this time of day is, a little more convenient for us, but Copenhagen. Hey, Janice from Chicago. That's where I am too. Met you last week at the Midwest Reiki community meeting, which is kind of cool because that's what we're talking about today, which is Reiki organizations. So from, what even do we mean by that? Do we mean like huge organizations, formal organizations, small community organizations of people within our global community? Hello, Ilana from Israel, Georgia, Moscow, Canada, East Texas, right on. And so excited to have this conversation, and really the questions that you submitted online make up the outline of today's talk, and so great. So for those of you, hello from Kazakhstan, from Alabama. Kazakhstan, I think you're up really late right now. Thank you for doing that to join us live. That's awesome. And yeah, if you are joining us for the first time live, know that if anything comes up with your audio or video, the best thing you can do is refresh the browser. Or if you need to, close out the window and log back in. That's only if you have some really big challenges with the technology. And also, there is sometimes a bit of a delay between the chat and the video as you're receiving it. So just know that later on there may be an opportunity for us to respond to some questions live from those of you in the chat. And if you're watching us either on YouTube or in a replay later on, today's February 16th, 2016. If you're watching the replay in any format, know that you can bring your questions to us in our community Facebook group. It's just called Global Reiki Webinars. It's a closed group, but look us up. You can find us. You can request to join, and either I will approve it or someone else from the Reiki community that you're already friends with is authorized to approve you to come and join the discussion there. You can ask questions, and you can always submit questions directly to us via email at reikiwebinars@gmail.com. And another thing about that email address is we do keep these public broadcasts completely free to you, and we welcome monetary gifts and donations so that we can continue to do this and cover our costs to create this experience for all of us, really. So I will in just a moment put up a link. You'll see it on the bottom of your chat where you can click through. It'll open in another page and you can send a donation directly to reikiwebinars@gmail.com through PayPal. And if you're watching the replay and you'd love to support us monetarily, you can send a donation directly through PayPal to that email address, reikiwebinars@gmail.com. So yay. Just looking at all the new check-ins. Australia, midnight here. Thank you so much for joining us. And without further ado, I'm going to open up Phyllis's screen and unmute her mic. I see her in my corner. She's lovely and excited to talk with you today. And here, just a moment. Here she is.
Hello, everyone. Wonderful to be here. in 2016, just after the Chinese New Year. And I'd like to just have us all join together in Reiki by closing our eyes, putting our hands on ourselves, and picture sitting in a circle. A very big circle. And know that there are people in each of the chairs. People you don't know. Maybe a few that you do recognize or have met on Facebook, or perhaps have met in a Reiki gathering. However, what binds us all together in a group is Reiki, our practice. And the effect of our Reiki practice. The experiences we have in common. Ah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yummy. Rachel, I just wanted to check with you. One of the things that I didn't do was dig out my headphone. So I'm not plugged in. Is the sound good?
The sound is great.
Okay.
We can hear you clearly, and yeah, just a little shuffling. The only thing is we'll also hear any shuffling you have, but I think we're doing great.
Okay, good. I'll try not to shuffle too much. Well, I have really appreciated reading through the questions that came to us through the registration, but also through email. And in reading these questions and putting them into a kind of outline, Rachel and I both realized that this was a great start to our journey through the big question, Reiki organizations, do we really need them? And, and I myself go back and forth. I think there are kind of different people in me. And there's the Reiki practitioner who wants to be able to contact other Reiki practitioners. There's the Reiki master in me who wants to be able to meet other Reiki masters and compare notes, so to speak, and experiences, and maybe do a little supervision, like, oh, I had this really difficult student and I didn't know what to do with the situation. What would you have done? And then there is this part of me, of course, that wants to be independent, that wants to not have just another organization ruling over me. So, then there are lots of things in between. And we're going to address some of those in-between places and some of the other questions. Some of the questions that were submitted as well did not fit into our topic today. So I'm going to take time today and tomorrow to answer these questions, and they'll be posted on the Facebook page. So thanks for asking your questions. Keep them coming, because whenever I answer a question, I learn something, because the questions are not answered just from my head and my experience, but as you know, there's something else that happens that comes through, and we all get teaching.
Yeah.
So, to you, Rachel.
Wonderful. So I'm just gonna ask Phyllis these questions, and I'm so excited watching the chat. I want to make sure I say welcome to Shirley from Hong Kong, Valerie from Jamaica, Karen in Germany, Bridget or Birgit in Portland. I love that we truly are a global community. And I also think it's a little funny, because here we are creating this opportunity to organize, to get on the internet at the same time and share some ideas and share some thoughts, and also asking, like, do we want to, how organized do we want to be? And I'm going to start with our first question from Kathy. And Kathy writes, what are the stated intentions of the Reiki organizations that you know of? Have you felt that those intentions have been met? Do you feel that Reiki fits within a professional model where a person would have to meet certain criteria to belong? In your experience, does having Reiki organizations give Reiki validation to a customer base? Is it necessary? Is forming Reiki organizations organic to the practice of Reiki as it was brought to us by Mrs. Takata? So,
Great.
What do you think about that, Phyllis?
Well, I'll start from the end of her question, actually. It's my impression that human beings want to organize somehow. And then the funny thing is that once we organize, we get into grooves, then we get to resist. So I don't know if we organize just to bring out the rebel in us, or if we organize because that is a part of our nature. There are some animals in our wonderful, lively world who are loners, and they basically live alone, and they connect only to mate and create new lonely animals wherever they are. But most animals are herd or flock animals. They live in community. And most of those communities are extremely well organized, well suited to the benefit of all those involved, and to the health of the planet, and eventually to the health of human beings. It's one of the things that we, as mankind, having the ability to overpower some of these natural organizations, have thought to benefit human beings, but it doesn't benefit the rest of the world as we understand now, and it certainly doesn't benefit our planet. So it's one of the interesting paradoxes, I think, of being a human being on the planet today is, you know, every time I use a Ziploc bag, I always think, oh my gosh, you know, should I do something else? Should I not ever buy another Ziploc bag? And I'm kind of addicted to them, you know? And I think that they're made out of petroleum products. And I drive my car that's using petroleum products, and also creating warming in the air. So there are all these really interesting issues that we have to deal with as being human. So I think it was very obvious that people who would practice Reiki, who in our times felt alone, and they wanted to come together with people where they could share their experience and gain more experience. So in Hawayo Takata's time, well, actually Chijiro Hayashi's time, and also in Mikao Usui's time, they all had associations. And I want to stress the word association because it's a very Japanese form of organization. And these associations were basically for people to be able to come together with their master, usually on a daily basis, to practice, to gain input from their master and teaching from their master, and to create a community, a group of people who would be able to exchange Reiki outside of that organization and to be able to further the spread of the practice by talking to other people. So is forming Reiki organizations organic? I would say not just to the practice of Reiki, but to us as human beings, yes. And the interesting thing that I think is that I know a lot of Reiki masters say independent master. And I appreciate that they are independent of any master organization or any affiliation with a group of people. And the very interesting part for me is this other part of the paradox, which is every time a Reiki master is initiated, I believe that they enter into a specific group of human beings with a specific purpose and, if you will, destiny that creates a kind of energetic body, an energetic field, and that we are all as Reiki masters connected in that way. So I'm totally happy about the physical part of being independent, but we know that we're all one. And
yeah,
Reiki masters, we are definitely a group.
mm-hmm.
Now, you know, in 1980, Hawayo Takata died in December. And in 1982, I organized, it took me a while to sort of figure out what was happening after my grandmother's death. And also, of course, as you know, Barbara Weber Ray was really adamant that she had been told that she was going to be the successor of this particular practice. And I didn't have any reason to disbelieve her. However, the masters, most of the masters who were initiated by Hawayo Takata and many of the students recognized me as the successor. So I had to take time to talk to Barbara. I went to visit her. We talked about the options, and it came out that it needed to be one or the other of us. So what happened is that Barbara had already started an organization, the very first Western, I will put Western, organization called the American International Reiki Association. And I really admired her willingness to take on all that having a big organization of Reiki students would demand, because I was not interested in this at all. So I thought that maybe we could get together in partnership, but that wasn't to happen. So I ended up organizing this meeting for the masters that Hawaii Takata initiated, including Barbara herself, who did not attend, but a couple of her masters did. And there were, no, I'm sorry, not masters initiated by her, but masters who were affiliated with her. And we met on the big island of Hawaii to pay respects to our master, Hawaii Takata. And this week was wonderful. It was the first time that we knew of that Hawaii Takata's masters had come together, and we spent the week getting to know each other, comparing notes about her teaching, sharing funny stories or moving stories or puzzling stories about our experiences with our master. And we enjoyed it so much that we decided that we would meet again the next year. And we met in Canada in a very small place called Lumbee, BC, and at a master's house, Barbara Brown, who was initiated by Hawaii Takata. And somehow, I mean, I didn't go planning to have an organization, but somehow the whole week was spent on naming this organization, what were our premise in coming together, and this is how the Reiki Alliance was founded. And I was sort of taken by surprise, because a lot of the conversation in coming to this organization was, well, what does Reiki mean to you? Is it more than a healing technique? What is a spiritual lineage, and why do we think that we have a spiritual lineage, and so on? So there were lots of questions underneath all this organizational part. The Reiki Alliance then was founded in 1983, and since then has been formalized as a 501c3 corporation in the United States, and has had an executive director and a board of directors since 1986, I believe, or 1985, something like that. And you have to remember that back in those days, there was one practice. So all Reiki masters were invited to join the Reiki Alliance, because we were all taught by the same woman, Hawaii Takata. And then in 1990, we discovered that there were actually a lot of changes to the practice that were happening, and some were not in keeping with the Reiki Alliance's, the members of the Reiki Alliance's idea of what Hawaii Takata taught and what the practice was. So then then of course membership came along, and after having a lot, they still are having discussions about membership criteria. So don't think that this is a kind of static situation. Every year there are huge questions raised about membership, about whether it should be open to the whole of all the Reiki masters, whether there needs to be an organization for masters with a common practice, i.e. the Reiki Alliance, and then other Reiki practices can have their own memberships and their own organizations, which is starting to happen. Of course, William Rand's organizations, another great organizer, William Rand, he has organized groups for his masters, I think, and his students and so on. And there are other organizations that have popped up that I'm not really familiar with. Sort of like there are so many books now, I can't keep track of all the books written about Reiki. Then in about the late 1990s, there was a movement in the Reiki Alliance, and also I feel like globally, so to speak, about the question, are Reiki masters professionals? And this, for me, is still another question that's, up for discussion. What does that mean to be professional? And is it possible that actually Reiki practitioners could be professionals? And what does that mean? And what does that demand of the Reiki practice, which I call a folk art, meaning it doesn't mean that it's less than a professional practice, but it's got a different focus. A folk art, for me, is something that we learn to use on our family and friends, and it is for ourselves. It's to become a student of the practice. A professional Reiki practitioner is someone who would treat probably not their family and friends, because there are professionals, like medical professionals don't treat their own families. They send them to another doctor, for instance. And what they do is they treat people who come to them, what we call as strangers, off the street, so to speak, with their own conditions. And so they become really professionals. And what does that mean in our world? And that's a whole weekend or a day that I'm going to spend later on this year of talking about Reiki professional practice and what does this mean and what does it entail. So in my idea of Reiki organizations up to date, there are only a few that focus on professionalism. Mostly they are organizations where students of a certain practice or students of a certain kind want to get together and compare notes, basically, and have a community. Does having a Reiki organization give validation to a customer base? Well, the Reiki Alliance, and I use the Reiki Alliance not because it's more important, but because it's the one I know. In the very beginning, it was asked that masters who were members of the Reiki Alliance do not publicize it, because we were one community. There were masters who were in the Alliance and not in the Alliance, but we all had the same practice. So we didn't want it to be something that would force students to choose somebody who was in the Reiki Alliance. Now that's still true, but now there's a whole other field of Reiki organizations and so on. And I think for most people, putting Reiki Alliance on their business card or on their website tends to associate them with a certain group of people, and also can give credibility to that master. And unfortunately, that may or may not be the motivation of the master, but it's often what is communicated to prospective students. So I can't change that. That's human. And I wish that wasn't so, because being associated with different organizations for me means, as a communication to the student, this is what I'm interested in. This is my focus of my interest. And if you relate to it, perhaps you'll relate to my teaching, rather than this master is better than another one who is not a member of an organization. So this is a product of our society. And I feel like there's nothing that can change it. So I think I've answered all the questions. And I appreciate all of them, Kathy. Thank you.
Great. One of the things that a lot of people comment on in emails and in the Facebook, and that I definitely experienced when I first started interacting directly with Phyllis, is just how down to earth and human she is. Like, I just love the retelling of, you know, the formation of the Reiki Alliance. And it was really just people getting together, this organic, natural thing. And it reminds me a lot of when my initiating master, her name is Tracy Ostrand, and she just reached a point in her profession as a Reiki master that she had a number of new masters, and she invited us all to her apartment to get together, and we decided we're going to start this Midwest Reiki community. And it's really what I observed in that small setting that I was imagining when Phyllis was talking about her experience in the 1980s with forming the Reiki Alliance, is just that each person in our group had their specific things that they were really interested in, that they got to show up in leadership about, and the ideas that they had. And one of the things that I remember is that when we were together, we, you know, in those first few meetings, we would get together and send distance Reiki to our collective highest purpose. And through that, all of us have begun to create and do other things in our personal lives and in our professional lives. You know, the majority of us do see our Reiki practice as also a profession. Though I know for me, I came to it as a folk art, and it grew into a profession. And I just love how much I'm able to personally relate to Phyllis as you're telling the story, and feeling like this really is a living practice, living, growing community. And I'll move on to the next question that you submitted in advance, and that was Patricia. And Patricia said, I have been involved with Reiki since 1986 and became a Reiki master in 1989. I have traveled the world teaching and meeting people from all walks of life who are interested in Reiki. What I found is the more organized Reiki became, the more I felt a separation in the Reiki community. Well, I believe Dr. Usui was the person who rediscovered Reiki, and he had his own method. He did teach people who became teachers who were interested in the other aspects of healing and incorporated them into their Reiki teachings. Thus, we have organizations that say their Reiki is the only way or more powerful. Ego steps in. Leaders or gurus are followed, and it's more of a business than a spiritual discipline. Do you feel Reiki organizations help Reiki, or would something more like Reiki groups and shares be more apt to connect people without so many rules and regulations? Thanks so much. So, yeah, Phyllis, what do you think about that?
Well, I am an idealist, and ideally, it would have been great to have had a way for Barbara and I, for instance, to have co-led the Reiki movement. It would have been a challenge, and I don't know if that would have actually been successful. Mostly attesting, I will say, to my own personality at the time and how unable I was to work with difference of opinion. I wanted to be right. And I will just claim this for myself, and perhaps Barbara has had the same idea herself. So it was not a possibility for us to work together, but that was my idealistic idea. And I think it's idealistic to say that separation doesn't come from Reiki groups and shares, because in my experience, there have been actually some pretty cruel things happen through not having the Reiki shares and Reiki groups be what I would call ecumenical, open to everybody, especially in this day and age, but that they have become actually more specific to practices and sometimes to masters. There are some masters who have limited the membership of Reiki shares and Reiki groups like a second-degree practice group, to their only people in their practice, because they don't want to deal with difference of opinion and difference of teaching. And I totally understand that. And it has benefit for those students who do come. But I would love for there to be another format also available for those people who want to actually practice together, but with different practices, and meet that challenge. It's something that we all live with today, and we see, you know, I'm a peace protester from the 1960s, so I just want you to know this is part of my personal background, that you know, one of the most compelling and poignant questions that was ever asked of me during that time, I was in something called the S training, and I went to one of their other seminars, and they said, I want you to picture now world peace. What would that actually look like to you? Like, what would that be like? And of course, the pat answer was, well, there wouldn't be any wars. Well, follow that chain of thought through. If there were no wars, what would that imply in our human relations? And what would that imply in our governmental structures and the way that we spend money? And, you know, there are just all these different things that happened. And so the image of having peace in the world became not so easy. And I ask you today, you know, if we had world peace, what would that look like to you? It's a really profound question, I feel. Well, to get back to the topic. So, what I feel happening, and Patricia points this out very clearly in her question, is that, well, let me back up. I'm going to start again. I've been introduced and have been taking teachings in a practice that I call, for want of a better phrase, regenerative developmental thinking. So this comes from the teachings of Gurdjieff through a series of teachers into a place where they decided that they wanted to take these principles and to apply them to life now, to different things like community development or organizational development. And that's what I've been interested in. And there is a very simple framework that's called a framework, where there are 3 concentric circles. And the middle circle is the individual. And the second circle is community. And the third circle is the service to the world. So in a Reiki practice, what we're told is, and what I was told by Hawayo Takata is, that first Reiki is for you. First Reiki is for you. And so I spent all these over 30 years practicing hands-on treatment on myself, thinking about how Reiki can serve me. And, you know, I'm like the center of the universe, and that's fine. Babies are their center of their universe, and it is a natural and important process to find out who we are. But there comes a time when that baby needs to be able to see itself as a member of a family. And hopefully that family structure is solid enough and strong enough that the baby fits into this family structure and sees itself as a member of a group and thinks about the benefit of that group as well as the benefit to themselves. And this is part of the training of growing up. So I feel like what has happened in the last years, especially the last 10 years, is that naturally our Reiki community is starting to grow up and to see itself forming these Reiki organizations and communities that will serve a higher purpose, because every individual and every community needs to have or be conscious of a higher purpose in their existence in order for things not to collapse back into what's in it for me. Now, you know, I am not America bashing, I swear, but I am an American, and I hear this all the time, and I think, well, you know, America is like, well, what's in it for me? And so that's how we make our decisions about whether we interfere in some other country's process or the laws that are being enacted these days and so on. And in Reiki, oftentimes we hear or feel this question, well, if I go to this workshop, what will I do? What will benefit me? You know, what benefit will I get, and what will come to me if I become more professional, if I become a better person or whatever. But if we have what is called the third line service understanding, then what happens is it lifts all of our individual process, and it lifts our family and our communities process into serving the world, into serving something greater than we are. And that was explained very effectively by Rachel when she was talking about the formation of this organization from the masters that came together, that were her colleagues and peers. And they are looking to serve the Reiki community, and this is just one of their ideas or their service missions, is to provide more information and to provide encouragement for Reiki students to simply practice. I mean, I just loved that piece of it, and I know that there are even what we might call loftier missions that this group is engaged in. And it is through that engagement of something greater than the sum of who they are as individuals that will allow everything to make sense, if that makes sense. You know, we can't just live our lives just for our own benefit. And I feel like as Reiki students, we go through this, you know, we go through in the very beginning, oh, I want to put my hands on everybody because it feels so good, because it's about me, right? Or I want to be the big healer, or I want to, you know, like make a miracle, or, you know, and that's totally normal. And I don't want to diss anybody for doing that, because it's a wonderful stage and opportunity. But now, after the 35 or 6 years of my being recognized as the lineage bearer, what I see is that hopefully we're maturing into really finding out what our greater purpose is. And what's such a great question is, you know, what is the purpose of Reiki coming to the earth at this time, and what service do we actually are we actually here to provide for our world community? And this is something that I'm doing a lot. I have a lot of conversations about these days. So, Patricia, that's my response. And thank you for asking your question. I relate to your experience totally. And egocentric is one of our personality issues that all of us have to deal with, and it comes out very clearly in Reiki. Thank you.
So we'll move on to the next question, which comes from Crystal. And Crystal writes, "Thank you, Phyllis, for giving me the opportunity to connect with you in this way." We're also seeing a lot of that in the chat right now. as well as questions that if we're not able to address them on air today, I have been pulling those over to a separate document that Phyllis will answer at some point in something that we do in the future. So Crystal also writes, my questions are about visibility. Why is working together to make our work visible so difficult? Our meetings are often in kitchens and small rooms at houses. Why don't we meet and book our consults together in a professional spiritual center? Can't we pay rent, or are we afraid for competition? Why don't we have a clear brand and public relations for our events? Why don't we professionalize together? I work at a big spiritual leading center in the middle of Amsterdam as a sales manager and do all the bookings of many healing forms, education programs, lectures, etc. And my experience is that Reiki is not at all visible at the center. No books, no public relations material, nothing at all. Sometimes there is a master who wants to put up some meetings, and there are always problems about enough participation and money. Why are we not professionally organized and visible? And she also writes, with all the respect, and with all the respect to you, Crystal, I think that these are things that I know I've thought about and am excited to hear Phyllis respond to.
Oh, okay. Well, again, this word professional comes up, and I have to say that I have to, okay, rewind. I'll start again. I went to a conference at the end of August in Germany, and it was about the history of religions. And in that conference, I learned a word called globalization. It isn't that I've never used the word globalization, but I didn't really understand what it meant. And in this kind of religious spiritual practice content, what it means is that when a religion or a spiritual practice is founded, it's often, the practice is often limited because of geography, communication style, and so on. In that time, it's limited to a small group of people. And that small group of people is able to maintain what they feel is the very essential gift of that practice. And excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Everybody.
Hi there.
Not right away. Okay. So when this practice begins to move out and to move into a larger group of people, and now in this day and age, globalization is actually just that. It moves through the rest of the world. It's globalized. And that happened to Reiki in like 10 years. You know, it went from the small, maybe 5,000 students. This is a number that comes to me from my grandmother's lists of people and so on. That was contained in the beginning in Japan. So there were a few in Japan. There were more active practitioners perhaps in Hawaii. Anyway, this was my assumption during that time. And then there were active participants in the areas of British Columbia, the San Francisco Bay Area, and in Chicago, and then little groups around where she would go and teach maybe 1 or 2 classes. So we have, there's been a lot of discussion about the globalization effect that actually came through Hawaii Otakata. So it went from Japan, the land of its, and the culture of its origin, to Hawaii, which was a multicultural experience for the practice of Reiki, and then moved out into another culture called American, which then it spread everywhere throughout the world. And there's always been a question in that movement and in that spread around the world, what has been lost? And often what gets lost is the very essence of the practice that was compelling in the first place. Mm. And this has been the concern for many, many Reiki practitioners and masters in the last years. And I don't have an answer for this because it's already happened. But the question for me is forming conscious, well thought out, well managed Reiki organizations a way to bring back or to assure that this essential nature of the practice of Reiki is not lost? That's a question, which I'm not going to answer. It's a question for all of us, right? Just a second. I do need to blow my nose.
Okay. So when Phyllis asked that question, I'm wondering, by her definition, by your definition, Phyllis, what are those quintessential elements of the Reiki practice? In my mind, I go to the simplicity of it, the compassion, and like how to define the essence of it. And I also will share with everyone who's watching that later on this year, some of the topics that Phyllis covers, one of them is all about mastery. What are the elements of mastery? And some of the things that are coming up just in the conversations that Phyllis has had with me and thinking through this year and where we're going as a collective, just in these experiences together, is to define those 5 elements of mastery, which includes the I won't get into it. I'll save that for her to define. But a lot of these same topics that are coming up that we're wondering about are all related, and it's very exciting. There are some really juicy questions coming up on the chat. I'm going to go back to Phyllis and see if you had more in responding to Crystal.
Right.
So that you were mid-thought with.
So one of the main what I call essential parts of this practice is that it's always it comes from, and I believe it's the tradition of a folk art is very important to hold these essential and these essential fundamental qualities that Reiki practice brings to us. And a part of that folk art piece is the understanding that when you are ready for Reiki, Reiki will appear in your life. I know this sounds really new age and kind of kitschy. And and the thing that I always love when I get together with any group of Reiki people, masters, students, or a mix, is if we would sit and speak about how we were introduced to Reiki, it would be story after story after story of some amazing series of coincidences or just magic kinds of things happening in people's lives. And that's exactly, for me, the nature of Reiki practice, is that it comes to us at the right time, at the right place, with the right person. And when I realized that that was true about myself, which actually took about 15 years, I just want you all to know this is not an easy process. So about 1995, I finally surrendered that the way that I came to Reiki and my whole path in Reiki was totally the right one for me. And I have to trust that path. It doesn't make me any better than anybody else. It's just a different path. And so everybody has their magic story of how they met Reiki and how they finally decided this was the time for me to be initiated into Reiki. And then the time that, and maybe this hasn't come up for some of you, the time where taking second degree is all you can think about and that's your next step. And then for some of you, the time where you realized that mastery was your path. And all of these stories, for me, they are not encouraged by professionalism. They are not encouraged by publicity, and they're not encouraged by sales. And I don't mean to diss sales. I want you to know, Crystal, that I trust that you are a good salesperson, that you are not creating an imaginary need in people, which is where most of the marketing energy goes these days, and then creating a solution for that imaginary need. So I'll give you a really outrageous and maybe disrespectful a little bit on your sensitivities example. So one of the things that happened since I've been growing up is the introduction of deodorants into our society. So when I was born, you know, there were no underarm deodorants. And then after underarm deodorants came in, then there were deodorants for everything, you know, so that somehow we all had to change our smell or not have a smell at all. But you know, organically, as human beings, as animals, that's exactly how we identify each other. That's how families identify. We don't know that consciously, but that's part of a baby's identity of their mother is her smell. And of course we want to bathe and to have hygiene and so on. But I believe that deodorants are like one of the oldest marketing ploys in the world. And it created a need that wasn't there and actually changed the priority of how we relate to one another. And then on top of that, of course, it provided a multitude of solutions for a problem that wasn't a problem. So for me, the whole marketing PR thing, I don't want us to point out to people that they are lost, that they have missed their spiritual opportunity, or that they might find another means to work with their physical discomfort and conditions. I want the person to seek a different answer than they have. And it's why, for me, actually marketing and sales doesn't work very well for me personally. If I am going to go to a place and have well, when I'll even make it more clear. When I draw up my schedule of events that I do, including first and second degree classes, I don't ever include an event that has not been asked for. That's one. And sometimes in a first degree class, the student will say, I really want to come, but then they might, I really want you to come, but then they say, but that week ends up, it doesn't work for me, so you have to change the date. Well, if that happens more than once, I just cancel it. Or I find somebody else who wants to organize the class for me and has a clear feeling with me that this is going to happen. There have been workshops that haven't happened, even you might say, even for me, and it's because the energy of what I offered and the timing of what I offered in the location wasn't copacetic for the people who had ears, you know, and so I just cancel it. I don't take it on as being a failure. I see that it was a suggestion and it wasn't the right timing. So then I have to go back and see what is the right timing. So all of this is very mixed right now because marketing is going through an enormous change in and of itself. There's a lot of marketing companies who only work in regenerative developmental process. They only work through this third line of work. And I feel that as the Reiki community and as these means of communication grow and we grow with it, that more and more people will be able to hear about Reiki, but not from a sales pitch, but from genuine experience and networking. So that's why networking for me is a huge process in our Reiki community. And I have to say that the internet has made a complete revolution on networking. So we have to, as a group, figure out how to use the internet responsibly and respectfully and in accordance with what I feel is the essential folk art practice of number one, oral tradition and the student finding the master. So, yeah.
Awesome. So, and it's really interesting. You know, I think about what I just heard Phyllis say is really thinking about how to utilize the technology to be authentic and like selling isn't bad. Selling is service. There's an exchange there, but making sure that anything that we are doing as individuals and as organized groups of individuals to make sure that what it is we're actually doing is caring and respectful of whoever we actually seek to serve. And it's interesting too, because I think about like this program. There are ways with technology to, you know, that I know we could do. I've studied with some of the like online marketing gurus about, you know, ways to professionalize or you know, soup up our production. And early on in our conversations, Phyllis said, you know, that's so not my style. You know, with some of the things I was suggesting, and as you just said that, I really understood. You know, because what we're doing here is having a conversation. The idea is that this is intimate. This is a network where we're connecting as a community. I love that. Thank you for you know, supporting me to walk through and understand on this level. We have some time left, about 25 minutes remaining. I'm gonna move into the next question that was submitted in advance from Sophos. And Sophos writes, spiritual practices can go through a natural evolution by the influence of different cultures through time. Nevertheless, certain consciously made changes supported by certain ideas can bring a drastic metamorphosis of the core teachings of the spiritual practice, but at what cost? And is it just an evolution, or are those practices at serious risk of losing their essence? How can organizations best approach this subject with respect for the diversity of opinions and at the same time honoring the system of Reiki? How are organizations with their acceptance or not acceptance contributing to the future of Reiki? So that's a big one.
Yes. But her first descriptive paragraph really talks about globalization. It is this. I am so amazed that through the internet there are ideas that go through the Reiki community and kind of get created. And then what happens as a result of that is that there's some breakdown of the actual teaching. So I'll give you an example. During the first part of the research that has been going on in the last 20 years about Reiki, the story of Reiki, and so on, there was this thought put out by some people who are researchers that Hawayo Takata changed the essence, or changed the form of, sometimes the form of the practice, in her wish to placate Western students. And this thought has become truth in a lot of different practices. And I now, in my own mind, after reading and talking with some of the researchers today, I've come to the place where I understand, but now I can articulate what I feel happened. So this is another point of view. As somebody that was recognized as a lineage bearer, Hawayo Takata, in her own way, and maybe through her own personality, did bring changes to the form of the practice. And these changes came from not her wanting to have more white or Western students, but it came from her wish to communicate the practice and the Japanese culture from which it came to Westerners who were not familiar with some of the very basic concepts. Excuse me. Some of the basic concepts that are held in the Japanese culture. For instance, in the 5 precepts that I teach in my own practice, there is one that says, honor your parents, teachers, and elders. And this is not something that was in what people have found in what is in the practice of Chijiro Hayashi or Usui, Mikao Usui. And I believe that this was put out by Hawayo Takata because she saw that in her practice, in the practice of her American students, they were not able to be successful in their practice because they didn't have this underlying cultural foundation of honoring parents, teachers, and elders. And that's so a part of the Japanese culture, even today. It's one of the main foundations of the culture. So it was her way of bringing in the cultural exchange and actually keeping the practice from the globalization effect of having it dispersed and sorry, I don't want to use the word diluted because that's not the right word. And perhaps changed by this thought, or she wanted to be able to communicate a very essential part of the nature of the practice of Reiki and how it correlated with the nature of the culture from which it came. So that's my example. And I think organizations who are formed with a very wide and visionary kind of mission statement for global service have the possibility to minimize the effect of globalization on the practice of Reiki. Not because they come to a strict practice where you have to do it exactly right, because, you know, there's no right way to do Reiki. There are certain forms, and each form has its certain gift of bringing it to the student. So what would be more interesting for me is to have an overarching mission for these organizations that include very diverse opinions and practices, and be able to see the similarities rather than the differences, and to really strengthen those similarities, because it is the similarities that are the essential teaching of the practice, not the differences. That's in my opinion. So when I meet people who practice differently, I immediately relate to them, because we have so much more in common that are come from a very essential spirit nature and it has affected me on a very deep spiritual place, and the same for them. So I don't want to waste time arguing about what are the right hand positions.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel that organizations, it's totally possible to have these organizations, and they could contribute to actually Reiki practice having a future. I feel that without these kinds of organizations, the practice of Reiki doesn't have a future, actually. That it will disperse into, something that I used to do, but I didn't do, and it will disperse into individualism rather than the practice really having a continuum. And that's my own opinion.
Yeah, wonderful. And that's right in line with the one thing that it's actually come up in a number of questions that Ricky asked in the chat today, and Isabel Yashe says she wonders the same thing. And maybe we want to save it for a future webinar, but the question about online Reiki courses. So specifically people getting attuned online, or I've seen some websites that are like, become a Reiki master in an hour by buying my ebook, and I things like that. I think is what you're describing as individualizing and dispersing. So there's this body of practice, this tradition or this lineage that people then individualize and then create something that is very different and missing some of those essential forms. So Phyllis, is that something that you'd like to address here today, or would you like to look at one of the other questions that was submitted in advance?
I'd like to. It's a great question, and I'd love to stay on topic, because we have three other questions that'll finish up and round this conversation out nicely. I'd like to stay on track. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. So Rocio asks, which Reiki organizations do you recognize as authentic, representing properly the Reiki principles?
This is a great question that I will answer in this way. Authenticity, the word authenticity comes from somebody being the author of, like when you write a book, this is authentic because it was written by the author. And I didn't get very good grades in literature and poetry, because I was always asked to have an opinion about a book and the meaning of what the author was writing about. And I mean, my own personal comment to the professor was always, well, the only person who can say anything about this book and have authenticity is the author. You know, like, why should I argue with somebody else about what the really means? Why don't we just ask the author? Well, that did not go over really well with my teachers. And and so when Reiki organizations are formed by groups of people, they have to, and I'm sure they do unconsciously, author their organizations from their own ideas and their own motivations. And that's what makes them authentic. Nobody else, including me, can say, well, they're authentic, because I wasn't the author of this organization. So that for me is really important to get, that if a group of people come together, they have an organization, they have a purpose, and they maintain that purpose, then for me, their organization is taking steps to open up and deepen the understanding that we have of this Reiki practice. And that's the purpose of the organizations that I know about these days. So thank you for the question, and I hope the answer is understandable for you, Rikyo. How did you pronounce the name?
I think I said Rocio.
Oh yeah,
Rocio.
Rocio. Great.
Like, yeah, like rose in Spanish.
Yeah,
so
you're good.
So Terry, I do see your question, and I think that Phyllis will answer that. Terry says, I'm still not clear. Is it important to join a Reiki organization? So we did hear directly from Phyllis that it's very important for us to have Reiki organizations, that there's a really, poignant purpose that they serve, not only to individuals who engage in them, but to the practice macro. But then your question is it important to join a Reiki organization? And I think that Phyllis will address that in the final question. So we've got just a couple more. And this next question comes from Kate, who said, in my experience, some Reiki organizations seem to struggle for money. Why do you think this is?
Well, in my opinion, okay, I start again. Sorry for starting again so often today. Somebody once said to me, not in a very nice way, that for him, it was obvious that the practice of Reiki has money karma. And I thought to myself, well, like, what does this mean? And this question, or actually a statement, has been with me since like 1983 or so, when this was said to me. And I really like it, because I believe that in our society, money has been the most abused form of energy that has continued through today. So the first coins were minted thousands of years ago, and were used for trade and barter in a trade and barter system. And very soon, when we get to the Roman Empire, and abuse was already happening. It's hard to abuse a barter system where somebody says, I'll give you 20 chickens for a cow, and you make the exchange, and then everybody's happy, right? But when you get a third party involved, which often is money, then the middleman comes in and you're ending up having this middleman, and then things get really skewed. So I believe that Reiki doesn't have money karma, that the world has money karma. The world as a concept of world community. Mm-hmm. I feel that one of the gifts of our Reiki practice is that it is associated directly with money. And for some of you, money has not been an issue because your master didn't ask you for money as a part of your commitment to the practice of Reiki, which is, in its absence, actually a part of this process of Reiki and money. Mm-hmm. Just because you weren't asked for money doesn't mean that it isn't there. And I believe that when the Reiki community realizes that money is as honorable and as spiritual a form of energy as giving a Reiki treatment, then we will have something to share with the world. Because money really, when I spend money on something, I am giving a part of my energy that I've collected to someone for food, for service, for keeping me healthy, and so on. And I select these people with great thought, even down to the gas stations that I go to. And I don't go to some stores or I don't go to some businesses because I don't like their practice. So it is very important that this happens. So, you know, people will send Reiki to almost everything, including organizations. You know, I'm involved with several organizations, and people would say, "Oh, well, I'll send you some Reiki for money. You know, that people, you know, you have more prosperity." But I think, why not send $10? And it's like, this is part of our practice to figure this out. And and it hasn't happened. So I think that's why Reiki organizations really suffer, because people are not willing, they don't see the benefit of putting energy into a collective.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to ask the final question that was submitted in advance from Tamara. And I see that you're with us live. You submitted a great question in advance too, that Phyllis has. She's thought about, and we'll get to that question soon. But looks like perhaps not today, like on this broadcast. Tamara's question, quite simply, is how would you envision the ideal future of Reiki being organized?
Well, in my ideal world, in order to maintain identity and the strength of practice, I would like for each different practice to have their student organization that maintains the practice and keeps it healthy, which doesn't mean static, it means healthy. And it means investigating what the effect is of certain hand positions, or why do we believe this and what is important about this. One of the questions that I want in my own practice is to start, well, and we are actually beginning to investigate what does spiritual lineage really mean, and what does it give to the organization, and what about the succession of a spiritual lineage in this day and age. And these kinds of questions really help develop the practice. And every Reiki practice that's out there could be doing the same kind of things. And this will assist us, instead of falling prey to the globalization process, to actually use that process to strengthen our practices and to be clearer about the boundaries of our practice. Boundaries are not like keep in, keep out. Boundaries are like to identify the shape of a practice. Like we all have skin. And I always think about us as being spiritual beings, you know, like just beings of light, which have no form and kind of disperse into the other energetics around us. But our actual human skin gives us form and gives us, you know, a way to identify each other. And this gives us this great paradox of being individual and being one at the same time. And if we could step into this paradox as Reiki practices, we would then be able to come together and have beautiful, deep, profound discussions about the places in which we have similar experiences. And there are a couple of Reiki organizations that I know of right now that have fairly wide-reaching, what I would call third-line mission statements that are struggling because the people who are on their boards and involved in their organization aren't at that level yet. And it's very interesting to see how all these things work together. Like as individuals, we have to have our own understanding of what our service is to the world before we can help our communities find their service to the world. And it is important for all three of these levels to be kept in our consciousness as we work through organizations. And that's something that I feel like is something that could take under consideration and really transform their own possibility of service to the global Reiki practice and to our community.
Okay.
I hope that was clear.
Yeah. For some reason, I'm hearing myself echo back from your computer.
That's really strange.
Let's see.
I did nothing.
So I'll just mute her feedback for a moment and go back to the chat. Dario says cell forms organs and humans form organization when they commit to a scope. So Terry, I want to make sure that your question is addressed. Is it important to join a Reiki organization? And what I heard Phyllis talking about is these different levels of engagement. And I think on an individual level, that's a personal decision. And I definitely heard Phyllis talking about there is a strong value and in having organizations in the first place, and that some individuals will feel called to show up and engage in certain ways, as each of us are here engaging with each other in this way, just to have this conversation. And yeah, Phyllis let me unmute you. Was that in line with your thinking?
It is in line with my thinking, and I have an addendum. Terry, it is not important to join a Reiki organization, but it is important to be a member of your community, whether that's organized or not. The practice of Reiki is not about an individual practicing in isolation. It's about, you will do that as well. But then there is another level of really finding your Reiki family. And I feel like that's a very strong, natural process. And sometimes those Reiki families organize into actual associations.
Wonderful. So as we're winding down, the chat's getting really active. Questions from Liz and yeah, a lot of the questions are actually about our next topic, which is the next webinar that we're offering live will be Saturday, April 2nd at this same time. And the topic is the role of money and in the practice of Reiki, the role of money in the practice of Reiki. And so the questions about the online courses without attunement, or the very, very cheap Reiki classes, versus Z had a specific question about the Reiki Alliance and the $10,000 exchange with an initiating master for students stepping into mastery. I know that these are things that I definitely wonder about, and I'm very excited to have a conversation with you and with Phyllis all about all those questions that we have about money and Reiki, and that we sort of got to today, but we'll be exploring in much more depth in April. So keep an eye out in the Facebook group. I'll be going in sometime this week. I'll be going in and I'll actually put up our schedule for the year in the pinned post. So the very first posts that you see when you go into the Global Reiki Webinars Facebook group, you'll be able to see when the next things are, and I'll always have the most up-to-date registration pages so that you can get in. Yeah, so excited. Terry says, Terry, I'm gonna, we'll look at the chat history, and Phyllis can respond in Facebook, or perhaps to you directly. And for right now, let's close out this session with Reiki, either self Reiki, or if it's in your practice to send distance Reiki. I'll be sending distance Reiki to our collective highest purpose, and I invite you to explore that as well. For just a moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all who are with us right now live. Thank you all who are with us in the future right now, joining us on the replay in any form. Thank you also to all of you who have supported us monetarily by sending donations to reikiwebinars@gmail.com via PayPal. We sincerely appreciate that. It helps us to keep our licensure on the webinar platform and really plan for the future, new opportunities for us to engage on a more intimate level. And I really appreciate every single person who is in this moment with me. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Love seeing all the messages in the chat. Let's now take it over to the Facebook group, bring your excitement there, and let's continue the discussion online. And for now, peace, love, and Reiki.
Bye.